Today, we're talking about the most recent injury updates around the Washington Commanders. We're also going to be talking about some more keys to victory for the Washington Commanders as they get set to take on the Seattle Seahawks. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, just like Jayden Daniels is going to be hitting Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Zach Ertz, and many others for multiple touchdowns this season. And so in exchange for hitting that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Washington Commanders. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Washington Commanders Insider family as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. And let's start with the latest injury updates around the Washington Commanders. And so we get these updates from Dan Quinn in his presser today after practice. And so if you want to see his entire press conference, you can go over to the Commanders YouTube page. And so just paraphrasing this and starting with the main points out of his presser, which was the injury updates. And so we got some positive news here from Dan Quinn concerning Jayden Daniels. And so it looks like that Jayden Daniels will, in fact, be back under center for the Washington Commanders. And so he does say that Jayden Daniels did have a very good week here. He said that he looked himself full speed. They really pushed him to full speed to see what he could do. And so they're pleased with where he's at, and everyone is pumped to have him back. And so this is a great injury update, knowing that Jayden Daniels will be available for the Washington Commanders against the Seahawks. And so next, he does give us a little bit more positive news around injuries. And so Deebo Samuel has been battling with this bruised heel. And so he does say that this week was very good for him. He said that he could really feel the speed out there for him. And he said that there was no limitations in practice. And so this is also a great sign, considering that the Commanders will not have Terry McLaurin. He did re-injure his quad in this last game against the Kansas City Chiefs. And so they're going to reevaluate him within a week. And so Deebo Samuel, they're going to depend on him a lot in this game. And so this is good that he had a good week of practice. And so next, we get some other injury updates. And so we get some positive news, and then we also get some unfortunate news. And so starting with the unfortunate here, it looks like that Colson Yankoff is going to be out. And so do remember it was about a week or two ago that he did come up on the injury report with a hamstring injury. And so he's out along with Terry McLaurin. And the good news is that Laramie Tunsil and Johnny Newton both got a chance to practice today and put in some work. And so Dan Quinn was very pleased with that. And he said it's going to be a matter of how both players really respond. And so we will see what happens with both players. I'm assuming that they are going to be a game time decision. This kind of goes into what Dan Quinn talked about in his first press conference this week, and talking about these players that were a little banged up out of this last game, that, you know, he's going to give them every opportunity to make it out there on Sunday. And so hopefully, you know, this is a good sign for Laramie Tunsil, because look, the Commanders are going to need him against a very tough defensive front. And then, you know, on defense, when you look at Johnny Newton might have to get out there and play a little end, because Joe Wood Jr. talked about Johnny Newton and saying that he would be a player that could be considered as far as moving him out to the end position. And so we know that this team has just really struggled with injuries at the defensive end. And so Johnny Newton could be depended on if he's ready to go here against the Seahawks. And so next, I wanted to go ahead and just talk a little bit more about some key insights out of what Dan Quinn had to say in his presser. And so he did give us just who is going to be the team captains for this week. And so it looks like that Zach Ertz, Percy Butler, and Marshawn Lattimore are all going to be the captains. And so with Marshawn Lattimore, he does say that his last game out was probably his best of the year so far. And he does acknowledge the fact that Marshawn Lattimore is always ready to go after it, because he's asked about just at this time last year, I believe he was coming over in the trade deadline, and just the adjustment that he had to make. And so Marshawn Lattimore, and just really him wanting to go out there and compete and everything else. And so Dan Quinn essentially talks about that a little bit. And then next, you know, just shifting focus here and talking about the defense and really what Dan Quinn is just looking for from this defense. And so he talked about taking away the big plays and the poor eye discipline. And so getting rid of those big plays that way. He talked about the tackling and getting turnovers, and really needing all three of those components to come together. And so let's see if the Commanders can put it all together against a very tough Seahawks team, because that is going to be critical. And so next, talking a little bit more about Sam Cosmi. And so with Sam Cosmi, he says that he is trending in the right direction. As he's come back, he's looking better and better each day out. And he talked about the communication with Josh Conley Jr. and how they are working at that and getting better. And so that is something that he was looking forward to seeing once Sam Cosmi got back. And so I think that is a great indication really of where this team can go, because, when you're looking at these injuries and just really all these players being out, you need everybody to get out there as much as possible, at least the players that are available. And so the fact that you are starting to get your offensive line back intact, and then now, they're starting to come together, this could be huge for this team really down the stretch of the season. And so next, just talking a little bit more, with this defense and really what they're going to have to do here. And so he's all about talking about just finding ways to just be disruptive to the Seahawks and their receivers. And so just kind of going into, the points around the defense and just really having to put it together against a very tough Seahawks offense and defense here. And so next, I wanted to go ahead and jump into really the game plan for the Washington Commanders. And really, we're focusing on the offense today. And so we talked a little bit about the defense and just one key. And so we will go back to that in tomorrow's video. But today, I just wanted to focus on the offense and what they are going to need to do against a very tough Seattle defense. And so I think that the first key point that the Washington Commanders are going to have to do in this game to get the win is they need to protect Jayden Daniels, because this is a quarterback that has dealt with the sprained knee. Now he's coming off the hamstring. And I just want to say, just as a runner, right, that has gone through a hamstring injury, the fact that he is going to come back after, a week here, this is going to be very interesting to see just how good he looks in the game. And so I'm hoping that he does not have to put on his Superman cape out there, because if he does, that could be trouble here for Jayden Daniels. And I think that the way to keep him, from just having to, extend and just do too much, you need to be able to protect Jayden Daniels and give him the time to get the football down the field. And so I think that this is going to help this offense, especially when you're talking about trying to keep drives alive, and then also to really wear down that defense and just take away possessions from that Seattle offense. And so the next thing that the Commanders are going to have to do is they really need to run the football. And so this is something that Cliff Kingsbury did talk about in his presser. And I think that this is something that continues to be talked about with this team, because right now they are still third in the National Football League as far as running the football. And so they have got to find a way to start early. They've got to get it going often, and they cannot afford to get behind. And so this is where, you have got to make an effort to get the football over to Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, a.k.a. Bill. You need to throw Chris Rodriguez Jr. out there and Jeremy McNichols, because I think that the running game is going to be maybe a little different going into this game too, because with Jayden Daniels coming off of that hamstring, I'm not necessarily sure that you want to run out QB draws and design runs for him as much. And so even though Dan Quinn did say that he's a full go and full speed, I would not be wanting to throw him out there into running situations unless he has to do that, to extend the play or something like that. And then with Deebo Samuel, hopefully he is, on the mend here from that heel injury. Maybe you can throw him in there with some more jet sweeps and stuff like that. But I think that this is really the time that you need to try to punish that defensive front of Seattle and just try to wear them down. And so hopefully we can see that from this team this week. I think that that's going to open up the play fakes and things like that. That's probably going to get that defense to really honor the Commanders a little bit more, because, they're not just going to be able to load up the box and then just play man-to-man coverage here, because you're gashing them on the ground. And then also, too, there's the chance that you can go over the top. And so the Washington Commanders will need to do that. Again, coming in third in the National Football League, averaging 137.8 yards per game. And so next for the Commanders, the next thing that has to happen, and this is something that I feel like that we talk about often, is just really somebody else besides Deebo Samuel is going to have to step up in this one, because I think that Deebo Samuel is going to get his targets. I think that Jayden Daniels is going to be looking for him and everything else. But this is the game where you need to see something from Jalen Lane. You need to continue to go to Luke McCaffrey, who has really shown some growth. I've been very impressed with the season that we're seeing from him so far. I feel like that he needs to get some more opportunities, because he's shown that he can definitely make the plays when he's given the chance in the offense. And also, too, he's making plays in the special teams as well. And so I think that you got to continue to keep going to Luke McCaffrey, and Jalen Lane. He's got to step up, because he's had the opportunities and he seized it a couple times this season, just hasn't seized them all. Maybe you just need to keep going to him, and then he eventually catches one and it just gets a spark going for him. And so Jalen Lane is going to have to pick it up, especially with what is going on with Terry McLaurin and the fact that he has re-injured that quad. You know, I said this before, it took him some time just to get back out there for this Kansas City Chiefs game. And if he's re-injured it and he's gone back to just where he was when he first got injured, then that means that the Commanders are set to be out there without him for quite some time, which means that other players are going to have to step up. And so, you know, aside from these two, this is where Zach Ertz really needs to take a step forward. Maybe still Chris Moore, you know, just other players beside Deebo Samuel are going to have to do this. It has to be really a committee here as far as the wide receivers are concerned. And so, you know, with that being said, you know, and just going back to the protection, and why I feel like that this is definitely going to be important is because with the Seattle defense coming in, they have 23 sacks on the year, which is fifth in the National Football League. And they're doing a great job as far as getting pressures at the quarterback, and they're doing it without actually calling blitzes. And so this is all according to the NFL.com stats there, 39.4% on the QB pressure percentages there, which is actually fourth, and they rarely blitz. And so that just lets you know how good, you know, their front four is as far as getting to the quarterback. And the back end of the defense has been pretty good as well, because when you look at what they're doing at this point in time, as far as the yards per attempt, like they're holding that down. They are fifth there in the National Football League there. As far as yards are concerned, they are giving up some yards at 230.1, which is actually 23rd in the National Football League, which shows you that you can move the football on them. And this is why the Commanders, as they're moving the football and things like that, they're going to have to finish these drives. You cannot end up kicking field goals. You need to make this defense pay, especially if you are getting past the 40. And I think that that's something that Cliff Kingsbury talked about as well, is that, you know, when you're getting drives past the 40 and you're only getting 7 points out of all these drives, you know, you have to fix something here. And so let's see what happens with the Washington Commanders. Those, I think, are some keys to victory on offense. You guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking here as the Commanders get set to take on the Seattle Seahawks. And so it should be rocking out there, especially since Art Monk is going to get his jersey retired. And so that is going to be great to see. And so make sure that you tune in for that. And look, as we always say, go Commanders, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.